The South keeps its nights close, and the things that wander those nights keep their own stories. 1. The bell tower of Marrow Creek. A single bell sits atop a brick shaft outside the small town of Marrow Creek, ringless and moss-caked. Built in 1872 to mark the town's first chapel, the tower became a landmark when fire swept the block in 1899, and 3 men inside never escaped. Court records note the blaze as accidental. Local histories name it differently: a feud, a lamp overturned in a quarrel. What matters to those who pass is the empty peal. Locals say, on damp evenings, a thin toll answers the wind as if someone tries to count the dead. Visitors who pause beneath the tower describe a cool column of air and the copper taste of old iron. Some swear they hear muffled footsteps on the stairs where no stair survives. The bell's shadow drags across the square and will not quite leave. 2. The Widow's Rock, Pine Hollow Plantation. A low stone outcrop lies at the edge of a former cotton field, half choked with kudzu and old glass bottles. In the 1840s, a widow named Esther Hargrove watched her husband taken by law after accusations no judge could untangle. She returned to sit on that rock for years, a lantern by night and a bowl of corn porridge left in the grass. Folklore keeps the lantern lit. Slavery's weight lingers in the story, and elders in town speak of enslaved laborers who tended fields and graves without kinship to the Hargroves' account. They ask that the sorrow be named rather than turned into mere chill. Today, the rock draws late-night travelers hoping for a glimpse, a lantern glow that moves against the wind, a soft sob beneath the pines. Those who leave an offering, a coin, a ribbon, say the light nods once and then goes out, as if acknowledged and resigned. 3. The Red Bed of Merchant Street Inn. A narrow bed, crimson-quilted and stiff with age, occupies the best room of an old inn near the river, its frame carved with grapevines. In 1911, the innkeeper's daughter, pregnant and alone, died shortly after the child's birth. The men who crowded her bedside argued over blame, and then her funeral passed under whispered condemnations. The room has been kept unchanged through renovations, a shrine to the building's past proprietors. Guests report waking to the weight of a hand on their shoulder, and the scent of rosewater where none was poured. One guide claims to have found the quilt smoothed each morning, though no housekeeper entered. The red bed waits under its canopy, a heatless relic that collects old promises and leaves them to cool. 4. The Lantern Walk of Old Ferry Road. A rickety ferry once crossed the wide creek where oaks hang low and Spanish moss tugs at the skirts of travelers. In 1936, a ferryman named Amos drowned in a sudden storm, though his chest was found above the water the next morning. His boss swore the lantern was still lit on the landing when the search party arrived. The river took livelihoods and left questions. Now, after heavy rains, drivers slowing at the bridge tell of a lantern bobbing across the marshes, far from any lamppost, its flame blue and patient. Fishermen who have worked the bend for decades say they will not set lines on nights when the light moves, for nets tangle as if on something unseen. The ferry is gone. The light keeps the crossing. 5. The choir boy in St. Agnes Cemetery. A narrow row of slate gravestones marks the churchyard where St. Agnes's choir once gathered in the 1860s. A boy named Thomas Kane, recorded in the parish ledger as a quiet soprano, died before his confirmation. The ledger notes no cause. The parish bell tolled for 3 days, and neighbors remember a hush that followed. Teenagers who sneak into the yard after dusk speak of a small voice rising above the hedges, singing a hymn that flips between joy and pleading. Groundskeepers find hymnals misplaced on dark nights, leaf corners wet with dew. One elderly sexton says he has seen a shadow the size of a child sit upon a low stone and rock an invisible cradle. The choir yard holds its breath, and the song goes on. 6. The factory furnace, West Bank Foundry. Brick and soot define the foundry yard where men bent to hot iron across the early 20th century. In 1918, an explosion killed 3 workers, names listed in the ledger and a washerwoman's memory, and the plant closed within years amid lawsuits and blackened ruins. The community never stopped telling the stories of warning shouts unheard, and a foreman who refused to leave his post. Those who pass the old gates recount a deep hum like a far-off engine, and a breath of metallic air that smells of coal and coal dust. At times, a sultry heat presses against the coats of onlookers, though no furnace burns. On the ruined threshold, a single iron hook remains. Some put work gloves upon it, and say they feel them tugged, briefly and kindly, as if reminded of labor that will not rest. 7. The white dress on Magnolia Lane. Magnolia Lane curves beneath trees whose blooms perfume the summer with heavy white flowers. In the 1950s, a young bride named Evelyn disappeared 2 days before her wedding. Authorities listed her as missing, and the town distributed flyers before winter came and the trail went cold. Rumors braided quickly, an argument, a lover, an elopement. But mothers warn children not to search the underbrush. At dusk, joggers report a figure in white standing beneath the magnolia boughs, turning slowly, as if listening for music. The sighting is never accompanied by threat. Rather, passers-by speak of the sensation of being watched over, a hush that folds around them like a shawl. The lane keeps its bloom, and the white dress turns with the wind. 8. The prisoner's chain at Hollow Bend. A rusted length of iron lies half buried on the bank where river and road meet. It was once part of the county jail inventory, marked in a ledger that still sleeps at the courthouse. In 1875, a man convicted of highway robbery was bound and then hanged on the bluff after a swift trial. Newspapers of the era record an outcry that split neighbors into factions over justice and mercy. Today, campers who set up near the bend tell of a heavy clinking heard at midnight and of footsteps that circle the tent before vanishing. One hiker found a single link warmed as if just used. The chain hangs on memory as much as on iron, and the river keeps whispering along its lip. 11. The teacher's window at Holloway Schoolhouse. A one-room schoolhouse with clapboard siding sits a mile off the highway, its panes clouded with age. In 1903, a beloved teacher, Miss Caroline Holloway, fell ill during a frost and never returned to the classroom. The register records her name and a brief note of condolence. Parents in the community recall children who feared recess at twilight, when Miss Holloway's old chair would creak though no breeze fit through the gaps. Now, the building is used for town meetings and sometimes for readings. Caretakers report the teacher's desk left slightly askew and a chalkboard that writes itself with lessons half remembered. The window of her old study glows with a soft, steady light at times when sunset should have already dimmed, as if a lesson still wishes to be taught. 11. The Soldier on Red Hill. Red Hill overlooks the valley like a fist of earth, its soil dotted with cartridge fragments from a skirmish in 1864. Records show a small engagement there, a hurried burial, and men who returned with eyes that would not forget. Families kept talismans in attics and folded letters in trunks, but the hill took one last memory beyond the living. Hikers claiming a figure in a threadbare uniform walking the ridge before dissolving into fog. Binoculars pick out nothing, yet footprints appear and then fade, with no trace of passing feet. Local reenactors give the place a respectful distance. Even when fires are allowed, embers seem to favor the sky and not the ground. Red Hill keeps watch, as if still on duty. 11. The Green Glass Hotel's empty room. A low hotel on the edge of town advertises charm and creaky floors. Room 3 has been closed since the late 1920s. A Board of Council minutes mentions a disturbance one winter night, an argument over money, a man who did not leave. Guests booked by mistake find their keys refused, and the desk clerk grows tense before apologizing for the inconvenience. Those who have dared a peek through the hallway report a room that smells faintly of tobacco and lemon, and a bed turned down as if a guest will arrive at any minute. The bellboy who once worked nights swore he found the room's bedside clock stopped at 3, and then later restarted on its own. The hotel accepts the reservation of memory, whether paid or not. 12. The Lighthouse Keeper's Light at Gray's Point. A squat lighthouse stands where the coastline is ragged, and gulls complain. In 1890, the keeper, Jonas Pritchard, logged a lonely stretch of records, and then one frantic entry: light out, boat lost. A storm took a fishing skiff and 3 men. The sea returned only a hat. Fishermen still leave a small votive by the rocks on days when fog stays below the cliff. They say the keeper is not found at ease. On mornings when visibility is poor, sailors speak of a lamp burning offshore, though the tower is dark. A bobbing, steadfast glow guiding no known vessel. The light comes and goes like a remembrance, and the cliffs answer with salt. 13. The Music Box of Eastport Manor. An ivory music box sits in the parlor of an old manor, its inlay faded and its tune thin from age. The family who once owned the house recorded births and deaths in a ledger, and the box is tied in local legend to a lullaby played for a child who never grew old. The manor passed through owners, each leaving small notes in the margins of history. Portraits moved, rooms sealed, quilts preserved. Guests who rent the house for historic weekends tell of the melody beginning at odd hours, notes spilling from a sealed chest, and of toys that jostle as if in a breezeless play. The tune is not malevolent. It presses upon the air with the weight of what was once loved and cannot be. 14. The Crossing of Old Mill Bridge. The bridge spans a creek that used to carry grain to a mill, its timbers warped, but still bolted into place. In 1907, a dispute over water rights escalated, and a man was found near the mill with no clear explanation recorded in the papers. A death that town historians call the dark ending, without adding detail. Walkers who cross after sunset tell of a child's laughter that comes from the mill pond, and of the sound of running feet along the planks, though no child is there. Some leave pennies on the railing and find them moved morning after morning, a small migration toward the water. The bridge keeps the sound of small footsteps, like a record that will not stop. 15. The Lantern Lady of Beacon Ridge. Beacon Ridge holds a narrow lane, and at its turn stands a solitary stone marker where a widow once lit a nightly lantern for a husband lost at sea. Church ledgers show the name Mary Huxley and a widow's pension entered in 1883. The town kept the story as a kindness through generations. The marker began drawing visitors after a photograph in the local paper captured a smear of light above the crest, though no lantern sits there now. Hikers report seeing a woman in a shawl at twilight, lamp held high, who turns and points down the hill, as if directing travelers away from a danger no one else can name. Those who follow decline to speak of what they felt. The ridge keeps one hand out, steady. The list ends, but the roads do not. Each of these places keeps a fragment of some life folded into its architecture, and those fragments collect into a night that will not let go.
If these stories drew you in, like and subscribe to see the next collection exploring the small towns that carry their pasts with stubborn, haunted grace. 16. The Clockmaker's Widow on Willow Lane. There was a cottage set back from the lane where clocks crowded a single room like captive birds. Mr. Hale, who learned the craft from his father, marked time with a patience that made neighbors rely on his chiming. When he died, not all of the clocks stopped. Some kept their face turned to the wall, some toiled onward at an odd pace. His wife, Eleanor, sat every afternoon with a cup gone cold at her elbow and a needle threading through the lace of a handkerchief. She kept one chair by the window empty, and, years after her own passing, the cottage door still closed each evening at the hour she always rose to take tea. Those who pass say they hear a small, certain rasp of hands on porcelain at dusk, and clocks in rooms down the street will agree by losing a minute and then finding it again somehow. 17. The attic stage of the Marrow house. In the attic of the Marrow house, a makeshift stage was nailed into joists, and faded programs pinned to the wall list performances from a century ago, farces, elegies, a soldier home on leave. The actors were not professionals. They came from neighbors who liked a good story and a candle-lit audience. The last program bears a penciled note, "For Tom, keep the light," and then the space was shuttered. On certain summer nights, when the town holds its warm, slow festivals, a curtain in that attic breathes as if in rehearsal. Someone coughs off stage. A caller practices his lines and then falls silent. Those who climb the narrow stairs report the smell of dust and stage soap, and a small, polite applause that dies like a struck match. 19. The well under the sycamore. Outside the oldest part of town, a sycamore spreads roots over a stone well that has no official record in maps, but holds every child's dare. It is said that, in 1875, a woman who had lost her voice came and dropped a ribbon into the water, and never spoke again, not from malice, but from the weight of a secret she chose to keep. The well does not grant wishes so much as it keeps promises. Echoes of names and fragments of sentences rise quietly in the hollow of the mouth when fledglings press an ear to the stones at twilight. Men who have pressed their ear to the ring report hearing a single sustained note, like a throat tuning itself for some impossible song. 19. The last passenger of Old Station Road. Old Station Road curves where the branch line once ended. Trains stopped coming when the rails were lifted, but once a year, on a morning when the mist is stubborn and the milkman keeps his cart, an empty bench on the platform will find a coat folded upon it as if someone sat while waiting. The ledger at the tavern tells of a man who missed his train in 1912 and simply did not leave town. His portrait hangs in a frame clouded with time.
Those who wait there swear that the distant sound of a whistle will roll over the field as polite and famished as an apology, and that the coat is always gone by noon, like a farewell left folded on the seat. 20. The orchard with no autumn. An orchard behind the vicarage refuses the ordinary turn of seasons. Pear trees bloom and bear fruit out of phase with the calendar. Leaves hold a stubborn green when frost should have browned them long ago. The church records show an account of a harvest held during a summer snowfall, a year when men kept vigil over wagons heaped with fruit no one could properly account for. People bring baskets there, sometimes to gather apples for pies, sometimes to set down griefs too large for conversation. They say the orchard keeps things cleanly handled. Once, a couple who could not have children left a bundle of small clothes among the roots and found later a tiny wooden cradle on the path with a note, "For when you can." No one can explain who left the cradle. No one sees it when they look directly. 21. The mapmaker's compass. In the shop where maps were sketched by lamplight, a brass compass sits in a drawer that should not open on its own. The mapmaker, a man named Baines, drafted routes by moon and memory, and sketched in places he had only dreamed. After his death, apprentices argued over his ledger and agreed only on one thing. The compass pointed sometimes to places that do not appear on the map. Hollows, alleys, houses that could be found only by following a quiet insistence. Modern cartographers shrug and call it superstition. Old wives simply cross at the wrist if they pass. Those who follow the needle sometimes come back with a pocket full of small, neat stones, arranged like a child's game, and a look as if they have been given something too fragile to speak aloud. 22. The choir that never missed Sunday. St. Agnes has a choir loft that knows the order of service by heart. During years when fewer could come, the loft still sang, not loud, not empty, a pattern of harmonies that drifted like incense down the aisle. Records show a season when sickness kept voices thin. Parishioners wrote letters and left offerings on the pews, and then one morning found the hymn book open, as if hands had been turning pages. Visitors sit in the back on cold mornings and report a distant, willing hum that steadies the throat. The organist, who has been employed by the parish longer than memory, keeps a candle lit on the bench, not for the music, but for the company. 23. The Post Box at 12 Elm. At 12 Elm, a cast-iron post box stands against a fence post. Its door sticks, and keys are often bent. Letters are sometimes placed within, and then found the following day with words added in a hand that is not the sender's. Once, a letter requesting forgiveness for a cruel remark was returned with the scrawl, "I forgave you before you wrote."
System.